Hello and welcome to the second edition of Extraordinary Outcomes. Thank you for joining us. I'm Shubhanjan Sarkar, your host and founder of PitchLink, the buyer seller engagement platform. We are totally enjoying our outing on the Sales Expert channel and would strive to add value to this ecosystem of sales thinkers. In our show today, we have a vital interview with Cash Nickerson on why we need to relearn the art of listening, NS3, our news roundup from the world of sales, SaaS, and startups, as well as a quick note from Maria Konikova, author of The Confidence Game on Trust. Let's dive right in.
In this bulletin, 5 unicorns emerged in the first week of January. Google and Snap may invest in the Indian startup ShareChat. SalesLoft raises 100 million, reaching $1.1 billion valuation. Indian B2B e-commerce startup Udaan raises 280 million. 5 unicorns emerged in the first week of January. 5 unicorns emerged in the first week of the year, pointing to a potential deluge this year. The list included Divi, Hinge Health, SalesLoft, Starburst Data, and Mambu. More are in waiting, and we will hear about Lacework, iBoss, Ikena Oncology, and Senti Biosciences soon enough, reported Alex Wilhelm in eXtraCrunch. Google and Snap may invest in the Indian startup ShareChat. ShareChat, an Indian social network that focuses entirely on serving users in non-English languages, added Twitter as an investor in 2019. It may soon receive the backing of 2 more American firms. The Bangalore-based startup is in advanced stages of talks to raise money from Google and Snap, as well as several existing investors. The new financing round, a Series E, is slated to be larger than 200 million. SalesLoft raises 100 million, reaching $1.1 billion valuation. Sales engagement platform SalesLoft has raised 100 million in a new round of funding, bringing its valuation to $1.1 billion. SalesLoft helps sales professionals through the sales and renewal process, assisting them with customer engagement, building pipelines, and managing deals. With the new funding, SalesLoft plans on investing in product innovation, scaling its enterprise products, and expanding into new verticals. Indian B2B e-commerce startup Udaan raises 280 million. Business-to-business marketplace Udaan has raised $280 million from new and existing investors as the Indian startup builds a war chest to accelerate its growth and fend off rivals. The new capital is an extension of its Series D, which secured 585 million prior to the new capital. Udaan has raised $1.15 billion overall to date. It is now valued at more than 3.1 billion. Thank you for watching. All links are also available in the show notes. If you have news about sales, SaaS, or your startup, share it with us at ns3@pitch.link. See you next time.
The EXO interview this week features Cash Nickerson. He's one of the original thinkers, and introducing him is not easy simply because he has done so much and so many diverse things. Cash is the chairman of the board and CEO of the ACA Group North America. An entrepreneur, lawyer, philanthropist, and martial artist with diverse background in law, business development, and finance. He has rich cross-industry experience from entrepreneurial startup to large law firm to large public corporation, experienced in transportation and mobility, railroad, trucking, aerospace, and space. Known as an expert on leadership, employment, staffing, and workplace issues and opportunities, he's also the founder and president of the David H. Nickerson Prostate Cancer Foundation.
Well, thank you, and I'm delighted to be here, and I'm glad that we finally were able to connect. Because listening is a topic that I can talk about for hours, ironically enough. I can speak about listening. I wrote the book because I had really questioned my own listening skills. And in 2014, so about 6 years ago, I really seriously started studying the subject. And I viewed listening as one of those sort of categories of soft skills. You know, if you look in the workplace and you ask yourself, who succeeds, who gets ahead? And you have to explain why the most technical people don't run companies. You have to wonder. And listening seemed to me, as I studied the topic and looked back on 30 plus years of a career in many different areas and disciplines, soft skills were really what gave people the edge. And I read things that said 85% of your success depends more on your soft skills than your technical skills. That doesn't mean you don't have to have technical skills. It just means there's a real powerful alchemy, unstudied side to the world. And you run into various presumptions. And one of them is that you can't teach those skills, that people are either sort of born charismatic or they're not. And the ones who are born charismatic take their technical skills really far in the workplace. And those who aren't born charismatic end up in cubicles, crunching numbers and things like that. So listening to me was one of those soft skills, and one of the ones where I also thought that it was teachable, learnable, where you can get better at it. And I myself was a great talker and decided to start with myself. And so I wrote a book called Listening is a Martial Art, which was a series of essays I had written. And it was, people had two reactions to it. One reaction was, wow, that's incredible, thank you. And another reaction was, well, everybody knows those things. And so in the Samurai Listener, what I really tried to do is take it to the next level, and take it to a level that provided actual exercises and actual dialogues and things to do, culminating in sort of like a 90-day tips to become a better listener, 90-day exercises. And so that's really, really what drove me to write the Samurai Listener.
So one quick question, because you obviously have a lot of interest in martial arts, and a lot of sort of belief about martial arts is that it is so much about studying the other person and leveraging the other person that I see a connect between listening and martial arts. I mean, I'm not able to articulate it very well, but I hope you get what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely. And I take a much broader view when I thought about listening. I did use my experience in martial arts to help me, because there were many occasions, as I realized over the years of studying martial arts, where the top people seemed to know what was going to happen next. They knew. They knew what that person was going to do. How did they know that? And they were intensely sensing that person. And so as I thought about listening and thought about martial arts, the consequences of not paying attention in martial arts, not knowing what's going to happen, is that you get hit, you get hurt. So the consequences of not listening are nothing, very little. I mean, yeah, you might have missed something, yeah, but our egos are strong enough to convince us that listening isn't all that important. But in martial arts, the stakes are so high. You're going to get hit with a stick. You're going to get hit with a punch. You're going to get slapped. You're going to get you're going to get submitted in a ground sport. And so I took a look at the martial arts. One, because I had an interest in it. Two, because I thought this sensing really could teach us a lot about listening. And then also that why not look at something where the consequences, where people have to pay attention in a deep and profound way in order to be good at it.
You do have a chapter on sensing, and we'll get to that. One thought I want to just touch upon before we move on is that why is it that we know that it's important to listen to the other person? Because if you're not listening and you're reading your own thoughts just for the opportunity for the other person to stop so that you can speak, which is what is the alternative and which is what most of us do, but we know that we are missing out a lot by not paying attention, and not to take away from the fact that this whole glorification of multitasking is also part of this problem of us not listening because we are doing something else. We are doing something else. That brief moment when possibly you took the call, I would have the urge to check my phone as well, right? So that whole distracted scenario, why is it that we have stopped listening? What is the root cause of that?
It's a very good question. Some of it's tied up with egos, especially when you get into higher levels of organizations. It's interesting, as we get older, we become poorer listeners. One of my theories that I haven't fully studied, but I've seen some studies on it, is that, for example, we think people's memory goes down as they get older. And of course, there are can be physiological issues, but most people who forget something never heard it in the first place. And so our ego and our filters are just constantly being built. But you watch a young kid, they hear, see, feel everything. They're very sensitive because they haven't put up fences and walls in their world of things that just don't matter. You can say some words, and honestly, you can see it in the current dialogue that's taking place with respect to racial issues in the United States. I talk about people having their shields up. If your shield's up, you're not hearing, you're not listening, because you're just not receptive to what someone says, whether it's because of deeply rooted beliefs or whether your ego is just so strong. However you look at it, that's a real problem with respect to listening.
So coming back to the book, you wrote this book of essays, and what sort of made you think that I need to write a book which will tell people how to learn to listen?
Yeah, it's really the result of people saying and thinking that they know these things. And it's knowing it doesn't help you. I say, fine. I say, pay attention. You say, I do. I read it. I get it. That's so basic. That's childish. That's first grade. But people don't do it. And so I really wanted to go to another level and have some actual exercises and some example dialogues of what it looks like, because the words are easy to understand, but changing your behavior, that's behavioral change is a challenge. That's why there's so many, weight loss clinics, anti-smoking clinics, whatever, because understanding is easy. Behavioral change is hard. And to become a better listener, it requires behavioral change, not just understanding.
Yes. Once you decided, and obviously you are already interested in the subject, so you are already reading studies, you are looking at possibly books or listening to other people, actually going, and you run a huge organization, so you are always going through this process of listening and watching other people listen. So you had a sort of a lab, if I may say so, which was available to you sheerly because of where you were. what was the next thing that you did?
Very good question. What did I do next? So instead of writing essays as I had done in the past, which is one great way for people who want to write a book. You write an essay, and you put them together, and you have a book. But what I did was try to break listening down into as many segments as I could, as many topics as I could. So I tried to come up with an acronym that people would remember. But first I said, okay, what do you need? What are the pieces of listening? So that's when you get into, things like, okay, sure. Are you aware that you're talking? Okay, that's basic. Are you receptive to what someone's going to say? So I could show up, my ears are open, but I don't like you, so I'm really not listening. So I came up with those, are you present? I put them into an acronym, but they're things like persistence, all the things that it takes to actually have a successful engagement, engagement and understanding and persistence and resolution, emotions, all these things affect our ability to take in. And so I try to get those down. So that's what I did next. I said, what is it? What do you need to really be successful? You get, something as simple as persistence. Are you willing to see it through? Or are you tired of the conversation and you check out, which is what we do a lot.
Right.
So that's what I did next.
So you so in the process, you are actually sort of structuring the book as well. That might not have been your objective, but that's what you were actually ending up doing, that you are structuring the book.
Exactly. I just wanted to break listening down into bite-sized segments and be able to talk meaningfully rather than just in general platitudes about, look, here's the elements. And if you're missing any one of these elements, you're degrading your ability to listen and understand. And from listening and understanding comes learning.
Yes.
So if you're hard-headed and you want to learn, then don't worry about listening. You're not going to, because you know it all.
Yeah. So this still was not the exercise part of the book. This is more the understanding part of the book. You still had the exercise part of the book to be lined up. What would you teach people so that they become better listeners? What was that 90-day plan? So that was still not there.
No. First, it was just, look, break down listening into all the things, because you hear people say, well, 90% of life is showing up. Okay, but it's not. It's not 90%. It's important.
Yeah.
In some ways, all these things are 100%. So no, at first I just had these, and then I thought the next step would be to explain each one of these things. What did I mean by that? What do I mean to be receptive? What do I mean by understanding? What do I mean by each of these things? And then you could create exercises to try and teach these elements of listening.
So were you discussing this structure and these silos with anybody? Were you talking to people? How were you going about now adding meat to the? I mean, of course, you obviously had an idea of what you want to write, which is how this came about. But then once you start adding stories, starting instances, adding examples, you need to draw upon other inspirations or resources and so on. How did you go about doing that?
Yeah, and so there it helps to have a good memory and to leaf back through. Once you've isolated something, then you leaf back through your experience of, in my case, almost 35 years, and you in multiple different scenarios. And then you say, where did I see this? Where did it work, not work? And then that's where, some of the stories come from to elucidate the concept. Right.
And were you finding any literature or any research that was going on which you could draw upon?
Yeah, it's interesting. there, listening is an area that's really understudied. You can take lots of classes on speaking. In fact, I think when I was in high school, there was like a course you could take on public speaking.
Yes.
But you find me a class on things, basic things that are important, like listening. You can find a class on listening. You could take typing, there's so many things you could take, but listening. So there's very, very little literature on these kinds of skills. And also, I think in part, it's hard to study in a lab. There's some. And I could tell because when it came to studying and reading about listening, you keep going back to this early study done many years ago, which said all of communication is nonverbal. And what mostly people have done since then was just kind of criticize that study for being overly broad but you had to go back to something like that. So it wasn't like there was a lot of new stuff. It was like everybody was kind of commenting on this old study that said how people's body language and their nonverbal cues, So I think ultimately the words you used in that study were as little as 7% of communication. Everything else, tone, body language, we're way off the charts. Now, as I say in the book, it doesn't matter what that exact number is, whether that was overstated or not. We know that it's still high. It's an unglamorous topic. It's like trying to teach breathing, which is a very important skill.
This is a great analogy. However, I was thinking as you were talking about it, and I was thinking, what is it that I strongly feel should be taught in schools? There are two topics that I have in mind, and one of them is not breathing, by the way. One is how to be a parent. Nobody teaches you how to bring up a kid. Everybody is a first-time parent, and you do what the hell you want. And mostly it is like a reaction to how you were brought up, and that may not be the best way to bring up another human being. So that's never taught. Nobody discusses it. It is not there, but it's such a big reality of life. And the other thing they don't teach you is how to deal with death. There's a lot of birthday parties, lots around joyous things, but nothing around grief.
Here's what we do, and I talk about this in the book. In kindergarten, we play a game, and every culture seems to play this game, where the teacher lines everyone up or puts them in a circle, and the teacher says something in the ear of one of the students, who then repeats it to the person to her left or right. And then at the completion of the circuit, whatever the circuit is, the final person who hears it says what they heard from the person that they got the message from. And it's gobbledygook and does not compare to where things started. And we run that exercise and we say, wow, that's really amazing. But then we don't do anything about it.
Yes.
It's really a funny phenomenon. It's just like, okay, well, we're bad listeners. Okay, what's next? Math. Okay, 2 + 2. It's really, really kind of humorous. The telephone game or whatever you call it in your culture, it's like, all right,
yeah,
well, we're bad. We just accept it.
Yeah. I am totally with you on that. Let's pick up one of the chapters and talk about it a bit. Would you like to talk about persistence? Because that's one thing you mentioned. How does persistence lock into the idea of being a better listener?
Sure. It's an important one because, you can show up, you can be receptive, you can want to understand, You can even be an active listener. But there can then just come a point at which you say, I get it. I've got it. I know. And then, so the unwillingness to persevere in a conversation is one of the enemies. And interestingly, some of the most incredible stuff comes at the end, right? And depending upon the person with whom you're speaking, I have one business associate in my life where they would talk and talk and talk and talk, but none of that was what they really meant. And at the end, they would mutter something under their breath, and that's what they really meant. And if you study the people around you enough, you can, and use these techniques, you can learn how people really convey what they really, really care about. And everybody's kind of different in that regard. And so if you lack persistence, you're going to have trouble with that kind of person. I think also with introverts, because they can be in a conversation, because we're talking as if conversations are one-on-one, but of course many conversations are multiple people involved. And it may take introverts who just have as high IQ as extroverts, it may take them a long time to contribute, but when they contribute, it can be invaluable. And so if you give up on a conversation, whether it's one-on-one or a group, whether because of fatigue, whether because you feel like you get it, whether because you're bored, well, or very commonly, you're distracted. We all carry 100 things in our head, 1,000 things in our head at once. And that's why one of the things that I recommend, and it relates to persistence, is before you go into a meeting or a conversation, things that are on your mind, you better write them down somewhere, okay? And then set them aside and say, I'm going to come back to you. And then go in to the conversation with a clean slate as much as you can. It's difficult, but so there's a lot of things that can affect persistence. It's not just a matter of saying, I'm just going to try harder. There are things you can do.
Sure. Sure. And I think it sort of brings back one thought that if you try to boil down, I'm not talking of climate change here, but that's there too. Most of the problems that we are trying to solve can be attributed to communication.
Absolutely.
And half of communication is listening. And as you rightly said, there is no public listening class. There is public speaking. But yeah, I mean, it's amazing. I mean, what you just said, that people talk of everything except listening, which is such a core requirement of communication. Let's get to the tools and techniques that you have spoken about in the book, listening and leading, listening and selling, and your 12-week plan. So tell us a bit about how you think someone who gets this message, because I think a lot of times we do it with the closest people to us, right? Not even to strangers. I mean, you talk to your wife and then you figure out what you said is not what she listened. Those are two completely different things.
These kinds of techniques, I think, are really helpful in a relationship. I write for the workplace, but if you just, I have 12 weeks where basically you're focusing on each one of these kinds of items, right? And so you take something like emotions. We know volatile people who react in sort of a volatile fashion, oftentimes, and trying to identify someone like that in your circle, I say, and have a conversation with them, and look again and try and see what's going to set them where they see they're going to be set off, and see if you can dial it back. See if you can bring them back. Back to persistence. If you study someone who you're speaking with, when they look away, they've stopped listening.
Yeah.
And so you know these kinds of exercise where you say, look, watch for this. I tell people, they say, well, what do you do when somebody has stopped listening to you? And this is a really fun, easy technique. You just stop talking and they'll come back. Just stop. Just stop.
Yeah.
And you'll notice they look away and it gets quiet and they think, why is it quiet? And then they come back to you. So
Yeah. I can totally believe that that will work, and yeah, that's interesting. Um, what else would be? I mean, of course, one should read the book and should figure it out. What else would be high on your agenda in terms of cultivating your own ability to listen better?
you know, I think one thing to do is to let people around you know that you are working on it and ask them to hold you accountable. You know, I look at people who lose weight and they say, you know, the people who create accountability structures around them, especially letting other people know, sharing your weight with a friend or whatever, and listening's the same way. I now have to be a better listener because people around me, if I'm not, say, aren't you the guy that wrote the book about listening? You know, so I'm held accountable.
Yes.
So I would say let people know it's an area you want to work and let them hold you accountable.
Great. That's a wonderful note to end this discussion, Cash. I really appreciate your taking the time.
No, it was my pleasure. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. It was my pleasure.
Our guest next week is Arun Varadarajan, Executive Vice President and member of Executive Committee at Colavera. He's currently based in Princeton, has significant global experience across Asia, Middle East, Europe, and North America in building solutions, creating market relationships, establishing a strong customer base, and building partner ecosystems in various leadership roles spanning sales, practice, and delivery for over 27 years. Arun has an MBA from Stephen Ross School of Business at University of Michigan and a bachelor's degree in computer science and engineering from College of Engineering, Guindy, India.
It is about the buyers, and it's about the sellers trying to figure out how to engage with the buyers and really support the buyers through their buying process. I think it's extremely germane to what we are going through right now, and probably have been going through for a while. And to me, there are, I would say, three reasons. One is the information asymmetry that one leveraged 15 years ago no longer exists. In fact, it's the other way around. Buyers are smarter than the sellers. The second is, I think they have a lot more of choices as compared to before. Competition has really stepped up. And I think number three is the buyers are a lot more clearer about what they want to buy. Earlier, a lot of the buying process was exploratory, trying to figure out what they should do. Today, the buyers have a far better view of their problem statement and therefore are engaging with the sellers to see if the sellers understand their problem statement and are offering them solutions to solve their problem. I think these are the three fundamental changes that I have witnessed, having been in the IT industry for 28 years.
And finally, here is a bit on trust and who to trust from Maria Konikova, a psychologist and poker champion. She also wrote The Confidence Game. This is from her session at the World Economic Forum at Davos in 2019, where she spoke about the psychology of the con, how not to get fooled. See you next week.
How do we create trust but keep ourselves safe, trust in the right people and the right things. So I say your first rule is actually the journalist's best friend. Trust but verify.